So again, thanks for joining us. We have quite a few people registered, which is really exciting. I think that shows just the intense amount of interest in this kind of topic. And we're here to talk about winter placemaking in our Rhode Island main streets and downtowns. And this is born largely out of a really exciting report from Bench Consulting that Jonathan is here to speak about and share. And we're going to just hear some really fantastic ideas about how we can, activate our main streets and downtowns, our business districts, bring people out, socialize while staying warm, and kind of using some creative ways to kind of facilitate those types of activities and just have, fun winter where we're supporting our small businesses through this really, really challenging time, even if it wasn't cold, as we've seen this past few months. So again, really excited about the interest in this topic. Really glad you're all here. I want to give a quick thanks to our sponsors today. We have our lead sponsor, Centerville Bank, and we also have additional support from Bank RI and Navigate Credit Union. So thank you very much to those folks. I'm going to introduce our speakers, and then we're going to hear from Justin from Centerville Bank very quickly, and then we'll get going. So our speakers today, like I said, we're going to have Jonathan Berk from Bench Consulting. He's the creative director at Bench Consulting. We're going to have Chris Vitale. He's the economic development coordinator at the town of Bristol, and they've been doing all kinds of great stuff. I actually asked him because I've been down in Bristol a few times recently and just seen, their adaptation to both COVID and to, embracing their own kind of versions of winter placemaking. So I'm really excited to hear from him. We've got Leah Hill. She's the coordinator of the Broad Street Regeneration Initiative. If you don't know that group, do look them up. Fantastic. It's a 3 municipality, joint effort in Broad Street along Pawtucket, Central Falls, and Cumberland, working with small businesses there and just doing a lot of really important work right now. And we're going to hear an update from her. Looking forward to that as well. And then batting cleanup, we have Adam Buck, and he's the owner of the kind of, I would say, the Grow Smart Rhode Island HQ #2 downtown Providence, which is Small Point Cafe. Really excited to hear from Adam. And again, I am, if I haven't already said it, I'm not even sure if I did. I am CJ Oberthauser. I'm the director of training and placemaking at Grow Smart Rhode Island. Thank you again for everybody for joining us and for our panelists. And I'll hand it over to you, Justin, to say a few words. And thank you again for your sponsorship.
Thank you, CJ. Centerville Bank is very proud to sponsor this important event. I'm a lifelong New Englander. Unfortunately, I didn't think this sort of seminar would ever be necessary in my lifetime. But thank you, CJ and Scott Wolf and the team at Grow Smart for organizing this, because it obviously is critical. When we were approached by Grow Smart to be the lead sponsor, there's no discussion. We didn't bat an eye. Helping Rhode Island small businesses is what we do. And during the pandemic, it's time to double down, whether it's PPP loans or opening new locations in Providence, Warwick, and Cranston, which we did all 3 this year, to sponsoring programs like the one today. We remain committed to Rhode Island and the small business community. I hope everyone is doing their best to stay safe and healthy during this time. But we understand the challenges that you are under and the stress that it is causing. Webinars like this are excellent ways to make sure you're thinking through everything and ways to adapt to what is an ever-evolving situation and New England winter upon us. So CJ, I'll turn it back to you and thank you again for having us.
Thank you, Justin. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan. And I'll just mention, like I did already, which is for our attendees, if you have any questions you want to pose at any time, we very much welcome those. We have time at the end to get to them. And just ask you, please use the Q&A feature here in Zoom, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. So Jonathan, I will hand it over to you. Take us away.
Great. Thank you, CJ. And thanks. Let me just get my screen share going here. So thanks, CJ, and thanks everybody for having me today. So I'm just down the road in Boston, Jonathan Berk with Bench Consulting, and it's a offshoot of Patronicity, which has been around for a while. And we're here to talk winter. And I think it's no better weather conditions to talk about winter outdoors in New England. And I think before we really dive into it, it's important to take a look at where we've been, right, over the last few months. This is a photo from Hanover Street in Boston. Essentially, due to really sort of some of the worst circumstances I think any of us have ever seen with the pandemic, it's caused all of our cities and towns to have to recreate how we conduct commerce, businesses, restaurants. You can see Hanover Street completely reinvented itself. We didn't get a chance to get up here this summer. We're hoping it's coming back next year in Boston. But really getting creative. And a local example too, Federal Hill, I think over in Providence, which I was really impressed with. And I think they actually went full open street. Newbury or Hanover Street still had traffic on it. So really impressed with some of the adaptations made down in Providence and all over Rhode Island as well. So where are we heading? We're there, right? This is us this morning. You got out of bed, threw in your heavy coat, your gloves. You didn't want to go anywhere, right? It's the winter attitude in New England. As somebody who grew up here, unless you're skiing, unless you're doing something active outdoors, you tend not to want to get outside. You complain about snow, we complain about ice, we complain about everything else, the cold, but we can do it, right? I mean, this is typical New England Patriots Day with an 8-hour football game and a tailgate beforehand. This is obviously happier times as Patriots fans. We're celebrating some good games versus today. We can do it, right? We know we can spend time outdoors. It's possible. I think it's just more of ourselves, getting ourselves over those hurdles of mental shifts of getting ourselves outdoors. We do it when we go skiing all the time, right? And spend hours and hours outdoors. You sit outside by a fire pit and Adirondack chairs. There's no reason why these mental shifts can't kind of happen and bring people back into our main streets and downtowns. And obviously, I should have changed this slide, but we used this in the presentation yesterday, but embracing winter across the region. It's really important to focus on a couple different things, right? Changing attitudes. I just talked about it a little bit, but I think this year out of any year, outdoors over indoors, let's really kind of encourage folks to take some personal ownership, dress warm, right? Wear wool, wear lots of layers, dress like you're going to that 8-hour Patriots game to come downtown and walk around downtown for a few hours, grab a sandwich, grab a coffee, grab a beer. On the municipal level, what can you do to kind of help these things? Allow for creativity, right? Allow for some of these different events, allow for outdoor dining to continue all winter. Relax some of the restrictions. Fire pits have been something, wood fire pits have been something we've been talking about a lot over the last few months. That I think a year ago would have been a crazy idea that you would have been laughed out of the room at. And today we're having local mayors call and say, where do I get a fire pit built and designed that can meet the restrictions and requirements of our fire chief? So I think things are starting to change. So really important to kind of roll with the punches there and embrace, as we've done for the last few months. And then long term, right? I mean, I think we're looking at this, and particularly this winter of the pandemic, as a way to get people back outdoors and supporting small business and embracing 4 seasons in New England. But it doesn't just have to be this year, right? I mean, I think we tend to kind of look at our region outdoors as a 3-season region. For the most part, we spend winter indoors and wait till spring comes and embrace the year again. But I think if we start taking the long-term approach of, okay, this is the year we can kind of prove it out. And then in the future, how do we continue to encourage people to get outdoors and get back onto these commercial districts and downtown streets again? And one of the key things we've been talking about too, and this goes back to some of our research we started doing way back in July, talking to a lot of cities across, especially central Canada, Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, over in the eastern part of Canada. Rethink the outdoor dining experience, right? I mean, I think if you're going to continue and allow outdoor dining to continue, that's great. And we'd encourage cities to allow it as best you can. But I think if you really think people are going to sit outdoors for 2 hours having a full meal, as they did this summer, you're missing the mark. And I think what we're encouraging a lot of folks to do is embrace the cold season, embrace winter. These folks in Edmonton, it's about 18 degrees is the average high in January in Edmonton, and they're sitting outside by a small fire pit having coffee. So I think these kind of things, encouraging people to embrace that personal warmth, but also encourage that flexible patio environment, high top tables, allowing fire pits in these spaces, and maybe adapting some of the menus to be more creative with spiked hot chocolates and finger foods and that kind of thing, as opposed to the more traditional sit down meals. And also, obviously, for this year, we're in a pandemic, right? Winter in a pandemic this year is going to be different than any winter, hopefully, in the future, and it has been in the past. So stay away from events, big events that draw big crowds. This is an example I saw from Denver, Colorado. They do a huge light parade every year, brings tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of folks downtown. They changed it up this year, and this is what we're encouraging communities to do across Massachusetts, across the country, across Canada, is really to embrace that idea of, okay, maybe it's not a one-day festival, but it's a winter-long program. In Denver's case, they took this one-day parade and spread out across the entire downtowns. All of these floats, instead of rolling through the city, are now positioned in different neighborhoods across downtown Denver. Almost an encouragement to get folks to kind of see one, walk, see the other. Oh, you're passing by a few small businesses, some restaurants, stop, patron those businesses. So really encouraging people to get downtown on their own time, on their own schedule when they're ready, and do it in smaller crowds than you're used to in the past. So winter places. So what I think part of the reason why we're here, and I thank CJ for kind of giving us the credit for starting this conversation, this is a winter places guide that we put out a few weeks ago. It started back in July. As I said, we partnered with the Boston Society for Architecture, Boston Society of Landscape Architects, and Municipaction, which is a design firm in Edmonton, to put out a call for creative winter ideas that could get people outdoors in the winter, and get people outdoors both in downtowns, but also just in the communities, but also bring customers back into the commercial district. So our two goals here, one, like I said, how do we encourage people to come back in to patron these small businesses, these restaurants during the winter? But two, knowing that we're going to be in this pandemic this winter, we're going to be dealing with restrictions, whether it's indoor dining again. How do we get people to come outdoors instead of the indoor social gatherings that you know are happening in people's homes and that we've been told are spreading the virus even further? So we had the call back in September. We received about 60 plus submissions from the US, Canada, and a few from overseas. All the designs in the guide, there's about 64 or so, average between 10, 15,000, depending on how you scale. And I can get into that a little bit in a second too. And some considerations you want to think about when you're implementing any type of winter activations, obviously permitting. Positioning in winter is very different than what you were used to outdoors in the summer. In the summer, I think we were looking at shade and how to get people covered from the sun. The winter is the complete opposite, right? You don't want shade. Shade's your enemy. You want to try to keep people out in the sunlight as much as possible. So position these things in places that get the most sun. Tents for outdoor setups are probably actually counterintuitive to what you want to do. If you want to get people out for a lunch outdoors in the winter, keep that open out to the sunlight. It can give you another 10 or 20 degrees and kind of real field temperatures. And wind is one of the biggest enemies. So how do you block wind, prevailing winds down streets? There's a couple examples I'll show you in a second. And colorful lighting. Believe it or not, from folks in Edmonton, we've learned that colorful flood lighting and colorful holiday lighting can actually kind of make people feel a little bit warmer and feel a little bit happier. I know right now the snow looks great, but next week the snow in our region is going to be pretty ugly and dark and brown, and it's going to be darker at 4:30. So how do you use some colorful lighting to kind of just boost people's moods a little bit? And then snow removal, make sure obviously you're plowing the streets, make sure you're clearing snow from the sidewalks as well to allow children, older adults, handicapped folks to be able to move about your downtowns and your main streets. This is just one example from the Winter Places Guide. Winter Warmer, I use it as one of the, what appears to be one of the more formal designs from our guide. But I think when we're talking to folks about how they're using the submissions in the actual guide, to look at the component parts, right? I mean, this whole thing is probably a fairly expensive lift, but I mean, look at the heating installations up on the umbrella. There's a fire pit in the center. There's some string lights over the top. Just a very informal setting that can be made to look more formal, obviously, through this design. Then an example for how the actual pages within the guide are set up. We try to give you a little bit around types of projects, budget estimates, low, medium, and high, $1, $2, and $3 signs. The implementation, whether it's an easy, medium, or hard implementation, how long we think it would take to actually install something like this. And then a basic materials list, and we can always kind of help folks deal with more detailed budgets and materials lists if you want to reach out to us after. To go through 2 or 3 specific examples as well, and this is one of my favorites from the guide too, and it's one of the more simple designs in here, right? This is situated in this rendering on a side street off of a main street. probably some roadway redundancies in that area. So you can kind of pick and choose which roads you could close down potentially. A parking lot, an alleyway, this could work just the same in those spaces. Really simple, right? I mean, introduction to kind of say, okay, welcome to the space, some warming huts, some islands for people to kind of sit around. And then some just really basic vendor kiosks to encourage some of the local businesses, at-home chefs, creatives, makers to kind of bring some of their wares into the downtown. This is sort of continuing on that idea of more informal outdoor dining in the winter, encouraging takeout food and, if you can, alcoholic drinks down to these spaces. Let's skip through that. So winter tree farm. This is one of the submissions. Again, it's a really intuitive, creative submission that is very simple. It's essentially saying, let's use evergreen trees, which you all know and probably a lot of people have in their living rooms right now, to decorate Main Street in downtown. Add some lights to it. It's a very festive atmosphere, but it also serves a purpose. And the purpose I was talking about before is wind, which is your biggest enemy in the winter, to help block the prevailing winds that might hit people who are doing activities outdoors, who are sitting at a winter patio. Installing those trees in a pattern around wherever you're setting up is a great buffer for the wind and the prevailing wind in those spaces. This is this shameless self-promotion of one of my concepts that I thought of with our team this year. It's Vacation on Main, and it's essentially based on the idea that a lot of folks are not traveling this winter. You have a lot of people at home, people are working from home, people are spending more time in smaller cities and towns and districts that they may not be in if they're at an office job or actually spending time traveling. How do you bring those people back downtown, give them an experience down there and encourage them to patron those small businesses? This is essentially saying the bulk of the concept is encouraging, if you have a Main Street or you have an economic development district in your town, to encourage them to purchase these little vendor carts for all the small businesses and restaurants in the area to bring some of the indoors outdoors, and then just basically set up some warming stations and some seats up and down whether it's a Main Street or an area park, and encourage people to kind of spend some time strolling throughout the district. So I'm going to use two quick examples, or actually three examples now from Massachusetts and some projects we're working on. We released this guide back a couple weeks ago, and we're lucky enough to be offered a pool of funding from the Barr Foundation in Boston to support actually implementing some of these ideas in communities across Massachusetts. So we're actually implementing a lot of these really quickly in about 10 communities. So New Bedford's one of the first, and actually some of you can probably hop over there easier than I can to check this out. But they're taking 2 downtown courts and turning them into winter wonderlands, essentially. Adding a curling mat, some outdoor dining spaces. They're buying a snow gun, which is actually less expensive than you would think, because obviously the snow in New Bedford is less reliable than in many places in New England. So they're gonna have some sledding, some locally designed art installations, some selfie spots that are designed by local artists. And we're fabricating 2 fire pits for the area too, to encourage folks to kind of sit, warm up, and then continue around the downtown shopping and dining in the area. And I use this slide as an example of a couple of the different ideas from the Winter Places Guide itself that they're actually pulling components from. I think I mentioned this before, but don't look at every page as something you have to pull out and implement in your town. You can pull different components and get inspiration and ideas from multiple ideas in the guide. And then the second one is North Adams, way out in Western Mass in the Berkshires. And they're working with 3 different components from the guide itself. One of them is Vacation on Main, some of the storefront window displays, which will actually encourage folks to engage with whether there's a business in the space or not, if it's an empty retail space, displaying some businesses that don't have brick and mortar locations, if it's a full business, displaying a quick access to some of the products that are in the store without requiring people to actually go in the store itself. And here is some of the installation from, this is actually about 3 or 4 days ago on the left, folks installing bistro lighting up and down Main Street. There'll be evergreen trees that are installed along the district. And then we are custom making a fire pit on that bottom right side. You can see a rendering of it that has met the standards of local fire chiefs. That's actually going to be mesh around the entire cage, so no one can actually come in contact with the fire. And that will be out in a public space along Main Street to encourage people to come, sit for a bit, warm up, and then continue to walk around. So the idea is create an inviting atmosphere, but also create a space that people can come to and stay outdoors a little bit warmer by giving them some warmth in between walking trips. And then Salem, Mass is one of the other cities we're working in right now. They are working to recover from what is essentially a lost Halloween season this year. There's a big push to kind of keep people away during the Halloween season in Salem. Obviously, that's for many retailers, that is the bulk. That's, I've heard in some cases 60, 70, 80% of their annual business. So a massive hit, right? So now Salem's looking to embrace the winter season as sort of a second opportunity. LED interactive lighting installed up and down the downtown area. A lot of these hand painted by local artists selfie stations that are being installed throughout the downtown for folks to come take a picture, continue to wander. And then we're also making custom fire pits for Salem as well, a little bit smaller than what you saw in North Adams. And those will be in 3 different downtown parks across the city with some seating around those as well. So that is pretty much it for my presentation. We can probably give some time after for question and answer, and I'd love to hear what everybody from Rhode Island kind of thinks about the ideas from this guide in their own communities. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email, tweet at me. I'm on both way too often. So happy to hear from folks.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's like the 3rd or 4th time I think I've seen Jonathan give that presentation, actually, and it just always gets me really excited. Just so many amazing ideas. Let me get ready to share my screen. I want to just throw out there too, actually, that I don't know how much of this is still available from the Providence Foundation, but the Providence Foundation here, downtown Providence, recently acquired money from the Take It Outside program in Rhode Island to actually buy at least a handful of carts with which restaurants could apply to, to use to take their businesses outside. So I think like the one idea that made me think of that was the cart, the kind of opening Main Street up to carts. So we can kind of do that here in downtown Providence, at least, which I think is really a really good solution to taking something outside these days. So here we go. Everybody seeing that okay? Great. All right, cool. All right, Chris, you are up. Take it away, and I will advance your slides for you.
Thanks, CJ. And thank you and the entire Grow Smart Rhode Island team for putting on this webinar. And thank you to our sponsors and the lead sponsor, Centerville Bank, for also hosting this important discussion. So I know that for our businesses, this was probably one of the most hard years that we've had to date. And so really what I wanted to do today in my presentation is just start out with where we've been from the beginning of this year and fast forward to sort of where we are now and what it is that we're going to be doing over the next couple of months. CJ, you can go to the next slide. So early on in the pandemic, we met up with our businesses and really tried to hone down what it is that they needed in that moment, in that time. And with the earlier restrictions and even the restrictions now, we know that indoor capacity is not really there. So the name of the game for our businesses was, how can we really bring customers and keep our capacity up so that we can keep staff on, keep them paying, keep them working. So early on, similar to many communities here in the state, we implemented a temporary outdoor expansion permit. And so with that, we really wanted our businesses to have the flexibility to expand and to set up as they saw fit for their operations. So, every business in Bristol is of a different size. And so for some businesses, it was a great opportunity. And for some, they didn't necessarily need as much space. So depending on where they were within the community, some could take advantage of sidewalk space, as you see in the pictures up on the slide. Some went out into the roadway, and some actually used some of our public spaces like our parks that were adjacent to their properties. So we had flexibility. We created an e-permitting process through Viewpoint, which I believe statewide most municipalities use, so that we could get these decisions to the businesses within 24 hours. So along with that, we didn't want there to be any permitting fees. And with regards to safety, we worked with the businesses. So if they didn't have access to safety barriers, we actually provided them in some circumstances. So along with that, we've waived local license renewal fees during the state of emergency, because we know that we don't want to be the ones that's giving fees right now. We want to provide as much support as we possibly can. We've hosted a couple of webinars, one being in partnership with Commerce Rhode Island on tech support. And with this, I think one of the points that came up was, with this additional space, is how do we look at that reservation system for something that is closed in, and especially early on in the pandemic, in some circumstances, you actually had to have people reserve ahead of time. So we really wanted to make sure operationally that it worked for the businesses to utilize the space outdoors. And just the last thing on this slide was we provided a resource hub. So I know that this information and these programs are coming up fast, and the deadlines in some cases are even faster. So we really encourage our businesses to check in to this resource that's available on our website, and we try and keep it up to date on a daily basis, just because, again, some of these deadlines are rolling. Sometimes the funds let up before the deadline does. So we found that to be pretty helpful, just keeping our businesses up to date. You can go to the next slide. So as we came here towards the colder months, we knew that weather was not going to necessarily be on our side. And as Jonathan mentioned in his presentation, people weren't necessarily eager to sit out for 2 or 3 hours outside and enjoy the weather. It was something where you really, had to winterize, and we wanted to make sure businesses, again, had that option to customize their outdoor spaces. So some of our businesses installed fire pits outdoors with the assistance of our fire department. We partner with the state through this Take It Outside program to get heating lamps. And I know, Jonathan, you mentioned in your presentation about the tents. So duly noted. So with that, we were actually very fortunate that we were able to find a vendor who custom made tents for us, commercial grade, got the approval of our fire department. And with that, window sidings, to protect from the wind, and inside, it gave the businesses an option to really customize that internal space and make it a little bit of a cool cave for merchants and business owners to really do with as they saw fit. So in total, we got awarded $100,000. And just in addition to the tents and the heaters, we also offered free propane for our merchants. So that was something where they could pick it up weekly. And that's going on throughout December here as well. The next slide. So for placemaking activities, I think Bristol has done a pretty good job about really encouraging engagement within the community throughout the year. But some of these things we carried forward this fall into the holidays. So with the season upon us right now, we have a local volunteer group that decorates the downtown along with our Department of Public Works. So we have wreaths that are displayed throughout the downtown on our streets. We have the decorative lights. We have signage for our ongoing Christmas festival. And we do have an annual snowflake lit up LED above Hope Street, which is our main street. So in the evening time, it looks very festive in the downtown, very bright. And it's definitely worth the walk if you haven't been down yet. In addition to that, we really want to encourage our businesses to customize their storefronts and really get creative. So in addition to businesses who annually take it upon themselves and take a lot of pride in that, we did also have some window display assistance through our Christmas Festival Committee. And I know that our local Historic Preservation Commission actually has some window art on display for rotation. So businesses can go to them and they have pieces that can go right in those storefronts for you at any time throughout the year. Earlier this year, we had the Bristol Art Museum here in town put out outdoor sculptures on town property. Again, really just encouraging the leisure activities, trying to space things out so that it gets people walking downtown throughout the day. And then we've also partnered to host a couple of events, community events within the town. So we had the State Street Fair holiday preview, which is targeted to help our retailers this season. We have a snowflake raffle coming up here this month. And then, like I mentioned before, we have the ongoing Christmas festival. Next slide. So just going on that Christmas festival theme, and because it is the season, I just wanted to share a few of these pictures. So really hats off to our Christmas festival committee, who really thought outside the box, because we couldn't have those big events, the big downtown Christmas tree lighting. So this year they said, you know, how can we reimagine Christmas? So one of the displays in our vacant storefronts downtown, they turned into their very own living Santa's workshop. So inside, if you see up on the top right of the picture, they really decked out this space with everything holiday themed. And with that, we also have Santa come and take pictures with the kids safely through the window at various times throughout the past month. So even if Santa's not there, we do have the display that's up. So if you see on the top left, throughout the day, throughout the weekend, you still have families coming and taking picture in front of the themed window. So good for a postcard, and it's a really cool event that they've done. And as I understand it, they might even continue to do over the next years. So with that, I just want to say thank you. And my contact information is here if you have any questions. And thanks again for allowing me to speak today.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I just want to firsthand tell you that the displays in downtown Bristol are really lovely. And actually, I think it was the first slide of yours. There we go. That's the big snowflake. It's huge. Actually, when I was last walking down that street in Bristol, and it was actually about this time of night as this picture. It was like very dark out, and there's no cars. And there was a group of young women who were like taking a photo shoot in the middle of the street with no traffic to get that snowflake in the shot. So it really does bring people out and about. And it's really great. So if you haven't seen it, I do recommend it. So thanks again to Chris. Up next, we have Leah Hill. And she, again, is the coordinator of the Broad Street Regeneration Initiative. So Leah, take it away.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. Chris, that was making me want to go see Bristol even more. We were actually hoping to go last weekend, then we got all that rain. So I hope that we will be able to visit your city this coming weekend. But yes, thank you. As CJ said, my name is Leah Hill. I'm the coordinator for the Broad Street Regeneration Initiative. It seems that there are many Broad Streets in Rhode Island. This one in particular is the one that flows from Pawtucket, Central Falls, and into Cumberland. It's roughly 3 miles. And it's primarily a commercial corridor, but there is residential there as well. It's an older road. And like I said, many commercial businesses, many of them being small mom and pops. So when you go in there, you're seeing the owner, you're seeing, you know, the family member, you're talking to the person who is making the decisions, which is great. But, you know, that means they're also just so overwhelmed at different times. You know, on a good day, they can be overwhelmed. And then you throw all these new, just, you know, you throw 2020 at them and it gets even harder. Just to give you some background again, so we are a collaborative effort made up of the 3 municipalities, as well as the Blackstone Valley Tourism Council and about 17 other partners, nonprofits, different landowners, Rhode Island Commerce, just all different groups that come together, different chambers of commerce to kind of help this initiative along. It started at the early 2000s, and then it lost some funding and then reconvened. So we're now 2.0. And what kind of prodded it back to life was that the Rhode Island Department of Transportation, sorry, I got distracted there. Rhode Island Department of Transportation wanted to redo the road. So we're currently in well, not now because of the winter, but in construction. We started in the spring 2020. And before Corona, that's what we thought was going to be the biggest hurdle for our small businesses was dealing with how to deal with road construction, because there's a lot of street parking, a lot of pedestrians. We thought that was going to be our main or one of our main objectives, was getting helping the businesses. Obviously now we have another hurdle. But can I get the next slide? Please don't. Sorry, we're all home today. So even with all this commotion going on, we're seeing investment still, new investment on Broad Street, which has been really exciting. We've had different businesses open. Culture Soul right here opened at 1269 Broad Street in Central Falls this summer. They are a sneaker establishment. Sorry, oh my God, I feel like a commercial. They're a sneaker establishment, and kind of unique in that they started out as an online, business, and found the need for opening a brick and mortar store. Usually it seems to go the other way. A brick and mortar decides to go online. Please stop. We have Blackstone Herbs and Coffee Bar right here, which is at 3 Dexter Street in Cumberland. They're right on the corner of Broad Street. Sarah, please. And they just opened a couple months ago. And they are coffee, tea, CBD, and they're getting a really great following. It's a beautiful shop. So all of these shops are gorgeous. So please check them out. And then Maria Teresa, it's like a body salon. In Cumberland at 8789 Broad Street in Cumberland. So those are just some of the new places that are opening, and finding Broad Street makes a great home for them. We're also finding during this pandemic, people, maybe have the time to kind of think a little bit about how to put money into their storefronts. We have the Pizza Man of Cumberland. They have new owners of their building now. And they, these are these two pictures right here. Oh my goodness, stop. They had just regular vinyl siding, old windows and whatnot, and they have really put great stonework and everything into their buildings to really make it attractive. And then right here, the Blackstone River Theater, which is at 549 Broad Street in Cumberland. Unfortunately, being a theater, they haven't been able to be opened at all since this started, because they can't have those large assemblies. But they have found, I'll touch on some of the creative things they've done, but with the time that they now have, they are able to put some physical improvements in. This is a picture of them getting their new roof. I know they've put some new systems in place as well, technology systems in place. And so that's that. If I could get the next slide, please get down. All right, so how do we get people outside? It's definitely what we're hearing health-wise, the safer place to be, and I think just how people feel more comfortable. So, people getting the tents and awnings, like at Vanderlee Coffee in Central Falls, they're putting up an awning. The Community Health Center has awnings. People doing the Take It Outside grants for heaters. Like I said, with Broad Street, it's a little bit unique because a lot of the businesses don't have their own parking lots. It's a lot of street parking or, shared parking lots elsewhere. So they don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to just go right into their own parking lot. So a really unique idea that the city of Central Falls has taken on is they are activating an underutilized area on Dexter Street called Dexter Plaza. And so they are letting businesses that don't have their own outdoor space use this space for people who want to get food and not necessarily go home. They've contracted with a local group for maintenance. And so they'll technically, the plaza will be open for this type of use Thursday through Sundays, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And they're getting heaters there and benches. And like I said, maintenance and trash removal and whatnot. Some things that we've done through the Broad Street Regeneration Initiative is even doing outdoor mask distributions. We celebrated Small Business Saturday, November 28th, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, where different, our businesses on the road, some of them offered promotions and just in general tried to really promote that shop local concept. And I partnered with LISC Rhode Island and the Pawtucket YMCA to do a mass distribution at the same time. And so they successfully handed out 6,500 masks to local residents at the same time. And we figured it was a nice win-win. People got masks. In this picture here, you can even see we were giving them right into the cars and also promoting for people to shop small. Broad Strokes is a project that I'm working on that happened pre-pandemic, but the idea about getting artwork into the windows of the businesses, just so that we can have local artists promote their art as well as promoting the business, show up here, my artwork is at this location. And we also hope that that will create further relationships with the artist and the business. So that will be, I hope to get some artwork into the windows starting soon. And then even just other small things that we could do. Unfortunately, there's always trash on any road that you go through. You're always gonna see litter. So having cleanups. This is myself and Donna Kaler from Keep Blackstone Valley Beautiful. We did a small cleanup just in Pawtucket, and in 2 hours had a lot of trash picked up, and it was a great effort. And it was really nice. People were commenting, they were happy to see us do that. It's just a way to be out there in a safe way. Just the last slide, please. Okay, so the great pivot is what we're seeing because of Corona. I think someone had mentioned in the chat about the Blackstone Valley Tourism Council. They've done an amazing job with changing kind of their events for the year. So normally, I don't know if you're aware, but the Tourism Council, one of their big events of the year is the Polar Express, the train ride that goes in the Blackstone Valley, going to the North Pole to see Santa. Obviously, this year they couldn't do that because just too many people in an indoor capacity. They couldn't do it safely. So what they have done now is have a search for Santa running their Explorer boats from the Central Falls Landing on the river. And you go on about a 20-minute ride looking for Santa. They did a similar project in Halloween time, like kind of a haunted river cruise. So they were able to adapt that for Christmas time. Also at the site now, they have the ice skating rink. They have a vendor fair. Where else? You can see right here the artificial tree, which I think I've been told is the largest artificial tree in Rhode Island. It's 40 feet tall. And they partnered with the city of Central Falls for virtual tree lighting as well. So that is still ongoing. So please go support them and check that out. I think all the boat rides are probably sold out at this point, but you can still just visit, take pictures with the new Central Falls sign that just went up, in front of the tree, and also support the vendors. I had touched on earlier the Blackstone River Theater not being able to have indoor concerts. So they've been doing in the warmer weather, they had some outdoor concerts. I think I saw some Irish step dancing groups in their parking lot that they would stream on Facebook and whatnot, but they're also doing virtual concerts. They have a Christmas concert coming up this Saturday that there's still tickets for. And Cumberland had a cool idea that the town of Cumberland is having a holiday light display contest. So they are having businesses or residents, as long as you're in the town of Cumberland, decorating, and you can you get your name or your address on a map, and then people can get the addresses and drive around and visit the different decorations. They have all different categories, and then the visitors can vote I think the displays are up, or they have to be up until the 20th, and then I think they'll make their decision on the 23rd. This is their website if you wanted to see the map of some of the locations. So it's definitely been a unique year, and it just trying to help the businesses and encourage them to roll with the punches. I think is a lot of is what we have to deal with. That it's not, as we're all dealing in our personal life, realizing this is not a normal year, kind of embracing, like what Jonathan said, like we have to embrace the winter and embrace these things and not fight it as much. So that's mine. And thank you very much for your patience with my little girl being a little nutty this morning.
Thank you, Leah. I appreciated the color commentary from your daughter. So I think it, added some comedy to our presentation today. So thank you so much. And next up, we're going to hear from our last presenter, which is Adam from Small Point Cafe. So Adam, you can take it away.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to be here. I feel like the odd man out because I'm actually just a small business that's looking to all these organizations who I have to thank for being here and sharing your thoughts. I've been looking to these organizations for inspiration or guidance through this whole past year. And also I apologize for my PowerPoint. I was trying to do it while serving coffees yesterday. Anyways, the motto of Small Point has always been just a comfortable place to be, which is basically the exact opposite of the CDC guidelines. We wanted people to come and hang out, like most of the restaurants that everybody loves. Come hang out and enjoy yourself and talk, or just be in a crowd alone, which doesn't really work and has made adapting very difficult. So we've tried to pivot, put in all the safety guidelines, the takeout windows and things like that to move along. And could you do the next slide? And we adopted Wally as our window mascot because it was a very lonely spring. We still remained open. Our business dropped just like everybody else down to about 30-35% initially, and has slowly built back up over the spring and summer. And then is cooled off as the weather has cooled off. My landlord and their marketing team has done a really nice job. You can go to the next slide, please. In the summers, this is our pre-pandemic photo of our summer festivals downtown. And just how does seeing this crowd make everybody feel after a year of pandemic? So the whole feel of being out in a crowd right now is very different for people. The psychological impact on our customers has been very noted. If you keep going to the next slide. Being in this tight of a grouping with for a lot of our customer base is just not what people want. Keeping the distancing, figuring out how to make people feel welcome but also safe has been the biggest pivot, on top of adapting your business to all the new requirements. So this is the pre-pandemic. Next one, please, CJ. And this is some of the adaptation that my landlord did for our down city neighborhood to make things. They shut down our street. They brought out social distancing. They took open space and coordinated with all the restaurants to be able to have online ordering that could be delivered to the safer spaces from the downtown restaurants. It was really great until the surge came and the numbers shot up and everything, and all of this stuff was shut down and just left this. They just still shut down the streets on Saturdays. Could you do the next one? And so we have the open air Saturdays downtown where they block off streets. This is when it initially started with food trucks and other things happening on the sidewalks. And right now it's just mostly maintained as a safe place for people to walk around to do their holiday shopping and shop at the local businesses, which and has been a boost to our weekend business. People like to feel like they can go out and be safe. My observation has been that about a third of people just aren't going out. They've gone completely online. About a third of the people will go out and do things, but need to have a very safe feel to what they're doing. And then about a third of the people just want to keep living their lives. And, you know, they'll do what they have to do, but they go out and they want to enjoy themselves. That last number has actually shrunk with the surge and the pause that's happened in the past month. And could you go one more, CJ? So this is what the streets looked like a few weeks ago. And it's definitely quieting down. We're still trying to adapt. And I've received grants and funding. I've received heat lamps and other items to try and encourage people to come and feel comfortable outside. And actually, I was just awarded one of the carts by the people. So I'll be running around with a coffee cart in the snow, trying to bring comfort closer to people. Could you do the next one, please? So this is what this is two of my photos. One, this is our basic setup for right now. We have heat lamps, and I have small tents that act more as windbreaks to make people more comfortable on the street. A lot of this isn't used too heavily, but it also is more of a marker that they're that we're open. And outside furniture now is more of a sign that there's still stuff happening. This other photo of our street is a mid-morning, midweek in downtown Providence. And if you've ever been to downtown Providence, you never see this much parking. The surge has been really difficult, and the adaptation into our fourth season is turning into a big challenge for a lot of the small businesses. Most of the pivot that I've seen a lot of restaurateurs is just going online for delivery and doing takeout, and which is, you know, been fairly successful and what most people are looking for to remain safe and confident in the pandemic. Okay, and could you do the next one? And so I'm adapting in all my free time of running a business and pivoting and you know, home learning. I'm trying to design like benches that are heated from within and make things that could be useful in this colder weather. A lot of the things that we've gotten have been adapted from existing things for, I'm going to say pre-pandemic. Like the heat lamps are really great, but you have to be a couple feet away from a heat lamp to really feel the effect. So like these benches I'm working on are windbreaks and also heated from within, so you could be sitting outside. I'm seeing the presentations you guys have. I'm going to be looking at a lot of this stuff and reaching out to coordinate with people to find some more of these solutions. Could do the next one. And this is basically the front of my store. Basically, we have at our front door, we have a plexiglass wall and a way to take orders socially distanced, and the requirements social and touchless POS, things like that we've done. I wasn't sure what to throw together with a lot of this stuff. I've been trying to add elements to our windows and get the online presence up, but this is how we've presented and are interacting with our regulars. One thing I've noticed is different regulars come out in different patterns. People have changed their habits on how they want to interact. And on days when less people are out, I see the regulars that don't come out as often. So that's been an interesting observation for us. People that are very afraid wait till it's quiet to come out. So having things that are definitely distanced and spaced out are going to really help a lot of us. I've been also working on a small FM radio broadcaster and figuring out the legalities of it also, so I could do events that were small FM broadcasts in a neighborhood in separate spots, so people would all be sharing the same event, but distant from each other. Anyways, I have a lot of ideas, and a lot less time to enact them all. And someone said we're all doing that dance and pivoting a new dance pivot at the same time. But anyways, this is just my what I've been doing and trying to keep our business going through all these changes and looking forward to the spring. This fourth season is going to be a challenge, and I really appreciate everybody here's input and thoughts on ways that we can get people still enjoying themselves and being part of the community. And I'll bring it back to CJ for questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you so much to everybody, our panelists. So many great ideas. I just want to say my regularity at Small Point, I've been, ever since the open air Saturday started, I actually made it a point to, I think I've been to like 10 of them. And I go pretty much almost every Saturday when it started. And I gotta say, like, in addition to the great people watching, which is like my favorite hobby, I would get a coffee at Small Point, and just the degree to which it was so much quieter, like the decrease in car noise just made it so much more pleasant, I found, for people to have conversations or for me to read a book or whatever. It was really like a different world. It was like the pedestrianization. I think people forget the soundscape changes so much, and it was just one block, and even just one block really changed everything. So just want to throw that out there. So we have some great questions coming in that I'm going to hope to get to. Looks like a lot of them are from our friend Eric Weiss. I want to, before we get to those though, which is for Adam, Leah, and Chris, of the ideas that that Jonathan had in Winter Places, and maybe even like elements of them, you know, were any of those really striking to you as something that, you know, touched you as something that you might want to try out, or even show to other businesses to maybe try out? I'm wondering if any of those strategies really stuck out to you for any particular reason. All three of you.
So I'll start. So, you know, I mentioned in my portion of the presentation about the tents. You know, I think that Jonathan made a very valid point, and I think especially during this time of year with lighting, I think having things bright and airy, especially on those nicer days, definitely something that we'll look into and see what our businesses think. And I really liked the evergreen idea, especially this time of year, keeping things festive and definitely breaking the wind. So where we are, where Bristol is, it gets very windy. We have the harbor right next to our downtown. Great in the summer, cold in the winter. So I would definitely look to that here going forward. And then I really like that idea about the selfie, you know, having the different selfie spots, really engaging the artist community. I think with what our Christmas festival committee did with the storefront, I think that plays to it a little bit, but I think it could potentially expand to other spots in town with a partnership with our different artist groups and our local museum. So that was just my first take on it. But no, it was a great presentation. I saw Jonathan's thing beforehand and definitely got the creative juices flowing, that's for sure.
I have to say, I would love to take a lot more in-depth look at these suggestions and ideas, but creating the outside space, like the blocking off of the street and making the trees or the fire pits, giving an outside safe feeling location to the customers and the patrons and our citizens for a place to go is a really great idea. Making a festive place to go and get outside. I know it's been, everyone I've talked to over the summer and fall has been going hiking in every direction possible, and giving people a place to go out and walk around that's not too deep into the cold would definitely help our people's mental health through this winter and give the businesses a place to help serve the customers.
What really struck me was when you said to embrace winter in your planning. I think even though we're all New Englanders, I think sometimes in Southern New England, we're more focused on, you know, the summer and the ocean, and kind of like winter is just something we have to get through. where in some of your pictures reminded me very much of like Freeport, Maine, where all the outlets are, and they really embrace, you know, they have the cafes with they've been doing this for years, the heat lamps and the fire pits. So not just saying like, you know, just run into a store and run out and try to forget, you know, that it's cold out, but really embrace that wintertime feel, you know, by encouraging people to dress the part, and feel like it's winter and enjoy winter. I think one of the, not benefits, but one of the things that we're seeing just with this pandemic is it's really making people slow down, and kind of enjoy these small things. So, you know, winter's not going to be here forever. Enjoy it while it is. And, you know, even that New Bedford, you know, doesn't get that much snow, but that they're really trying to create that winter wonderland, was really a cool idea. I guess I was just curious maybe who maintains those fire pits and whether that's like on a business by business thing, or is it more, you know, a main street or a downtown? And then, but before we get to that, I just, Adam, when you were talking about your last slide where you showed everything that you were doing health-wise, I would just want to encourage you to put that out there to your customers, let them know. What I'm hearing from different, you know, webinars and information sessions about this pandemic, them saying like, we all know what we're all doing for our businesses, but really promote that out there and let them know that you're following the guidelines and going above and beyond, is a way to make people feel a lot better. So good work.
Awesome, thank you. I've had a lot of customers comment and appreciate what we've done. And lately being very, appreciative of us trying to keep everybody safe.
And just even sharing that information on social media, like, I think helps people too.
So to jump in really quick, thanks for those comments too. I mean, we started looking at winter in July. I remember the day we started talking about it, it was like 96 and humid and muggy. We researched a lot of what Edmonton was doing. And I think that's really what we took a lot of our learnings from. And if you want to wonk and get a little geeky on this stuff, there's a great winter city guide from the city of Edmonton that points out a lot of these seemingly pretty obvious basic things about city planning in winter, like the sunlight, like using colorful lighting, like trying to block winds that you just don't necessarily think of, because we always have thought of winter as a season that we just kind of get through and don't really embrace. And I think a lot of the quotes we've heard from folks in Edmonton were, they started really doing this work about 8-9 years ago as a concerted effort. They hired a city planner who focuses solely on winter. They said they were surprised at how much people were just dying to get outdoors in the winter in cities, in Edmonton in particular, and how very little small interventions were just getting people outside and just walking around and outdoors again. So the response was immediate and the response was strong, and it's still been strong there to this date. And it's sort of slowly changing their city's culture around winter. To the question on fire pits, every city's different. As somebody who lives in Boston and has been to Massachusetts their whole life, seeing public fire pits was not something I thought I'd ever see. So I've been surprised at how willing a lot of city fire chiefs have been to kind of work with their downtown. So if you talk about New Bedford's, the city of New Bedford is actually operating that space, their economic development department. The fire pit itself, when it's operating, it's only operating in 2 days a week, and it needs to be watched by a trained fire suppression expert. So whether that's firemen or somebody trained in town. Other towns are a little bit different. North Adams is doing it where they are hiring somebody who's being trained in fire suppression to man the fire pit when it's on. And they're allowing different groups, like community groups, neighborhood associations, business associations, to have small meetings at that space during the week. So Tuesday afternoon, if they want to have their downtown business association get together and coffee, they can do that in that space. They can observe the fire pit for free, stoke the fire themselves. There'll be an expert there trained to do it. And part of the funding that we were lucky enough to get from the Bar Foundation is paying for these materials, but it's also paying for folks to actually man the fire pits and man the events as they're open, or man the programming as they're open, plus events.
Awesome, thank you guys so much for that. So we have a lot of great questions. I'm going to try to get to as many of these as we can. the one that it actually came in pretty early, so I want to get to this first, which is there any advice for a restaurant that has no sidewalk or patio available? And my first thought would be, and I'll let our panel talk about this, but my first thought would be to try and utilize any parking spaces that are adjacent. That's been a strategy that was rolled out really right when the coronavirus started. I know Bristol, you guys had some really kind of large, beautiful, dining parklets, if you will, and we've been seeing that in Providence as well. So that'd be my first thought, but I welcome any other, again, any advice for a restaurant with no sidewalk or patio available, especially now with the winter.
This is Chris. So I guess the two things, and again, every community is a little bit different, but in Bristol, the way we set it up was in addition to the space in front of your business, in front of your restaurant, you could also use private property adjacent, obviously with the agreement of that property owner, as well as adjacent public property. So, again, we have a couple restaurants that are adjacent to parks or down the street from parks, and similar to what was done in Providence, as Adam was mentioning before, we had some restaurants who had set up a little bit spaced away from their storefront and delivered so that they could have that additional space.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing in New Bedford is by setting up this outdoor snow space, they're essentially allowing tables to be placed out there so folks can grab takeout coffee, pastries, sandwiches from area restaurants, and they're encouraged to consume it in that space. So, I mean, I think it's a matter of being flexible. Like you said, the street parking, I think if anything in this pandemic, we've learned that if you're a business located in more of an urban setting, the parking spot right out front isn't necessarily the key to your business succeeding. It's probably a better use to have that outdoor dining and a more prosperous use for the business itself.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing, like Adam, I'm so glad you get to use one of these carts. I think the availability to use one of those carts is really important, but I think that's an interesting strategy if you're a restaurant or a cafe that doesn't have maybe like physical space that would work adjacent or that would suit your needs for whatever reason. I think getting mobile is a really interesting strategy. And Jonathan, speaking of the kind of winter wonderland in New Bedford, we had a question about that. So I thought I'd ask. So the question is basically for that kind of project, or even for the other ideas that you show up from North Adams or Salem, who takes on the project management and implementation of those things, and then who funds them as well is the question.
So all three of those examples were funded through Bar Foundation funding. In Massachusetts, we also do have DOT program. It's shared winter streets and spaces. There was a summer version and now there's a winter version. So that funding is also available for a lot of these types of implementations as well. So that's an opportunity. I'm not sure what Rhode Island has from DOT or from the state level for this work. In terms of who's planning each project, it's different by city, as you'd expect. Cities that have main streets that have a bid are in a better position to do these projects. And I think we've been saying a lot of people have been saying for a while that cities that have an organized business organization like Leah's are going to be in a better position coming out of this pandemic to do these types of interventions necessary to bring people back. So that's what we've seen. We have seen a number of cities whether initiate the initiative, like in New Bedford with the Economic Development Department, or in Salem, which was started by Salem Main Streets, but has been embraced by the city, and city staff are now working on that project too. So it really depends on the city and city's capacity, and then the volunteer capacity locally too.
Awesome, thank you, Jonathan. So we have one question here that I also had a very similar question myself. So I'm going to try to kind of combine them, which is basically asking about, I guess mostly municipalities and maybe the states as well, but being kind of flexible with things like permitting. And I think the question is sort of like, considering all that stuff as red tape, and there are other types of red tape as well, to get through this pandemic so far when it was warmer and now that it's getting colder, how much red tape has gotten in the way? How much red tape, what kinds of red tape has been sort of done away with? And, what does it seem like that's something we can institutionalize going forward, where maybe we don't have so many hurdles to put out some of these creative ideas, or basically like making some of these adjustments and adaptations permanent. How is that looking? What is the landscape looking like? And also, what has the past looked like in adapting so far?
That was for me, right? Anybody?
Everybody muted.
Let anybody? Let Chris jump in because he unmuted himself.
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. So in Bristol, I think when this started, again, I think we want to reduce the burdens. And certainly as we've gone throughout this year and as we kind of navigate our way through this great experiment, we're looking at things where, like I mentioned with the Christmas festival, things that, until you necessarily try it, until people get a feel for it, it's something where you don't know if it's going to stick, or don't know if it's a concept people are necessarily going to take a liking to. I think with the expanded outdoor seating that we've had, I think a lot of people equate to the outdoor seating that you see a lot in Europe. And I think it's something that a lot of our businesses have definitely expressed an interest in continuing. I think with the Take It Outside program this past fall, as well as the local executive orders that we've had in Bristol, I think we're going to be continuing that probably into the spring. And then there's actually a petition in front of our council, or there was a petition here a month or so ago, to turn that into an annual concept. So obviously there has to be buy-in within the businesses, and it has to be a format that makes sense for our town. And I think that discussion's ongoing, but certainly the willingness to see how that would look, and if we can make it work, obviously we want to partner with our business community. I think the other thing too, when you mentioned red tape, I think most communities, and Bristol included, the more things that we can do administratively online, and the less support documentation that we need on our side of things to really make a smart judgment on it. So for example, fire suppression, there are certain things that we do need, but there are other areas where we've been able to be flexible here over the past year, and we'll definitely look at doing that going forward.
In my experience, I found that a lot of the city and state and the municipalities have been really eager to work and make adjustments and make the changes needed to just help the small businesses try and adapt and pivot to whatever we're trying, to stay serving our customers and stay afloat. So I think it's been a very positive. People have really been trying to work together on this.
Yeah, I mean, CJ, I think you asked like the long-term takeaways from this, and I think you've seen changes to cities that people have been talking about for decades that happened in 2 months, that didn't cause the sky to fall, that actually sort of boosted businesses. I know it's difficult circumstances, but those changes have actually supported businesses. I mean, quality of life, the vibrancy in some neighborhoods actually increased during the pandemic because more people are spending time there as opposed to going into downtown desk jobs. I think if anything, you hope one of the big takeaways from this in terms of like the public realm, at least, is willingness to kind of try new things from the city level, knowing that there's support for it. I'm going to let Chris talk to that specifically. But also residents kind of seeing that losing 10, 20 parking spaces in their neighborhoods isn't the end of the world, right? I mean, I think a lot of times you talk about taking away parking spaces, that conversation was, you're taking my car from me, and it became a very personal conversation very quickly. Now I think people have seen that those changes, and even on a large scale, are not as impactful and actually beneficial to business bottom lines, but also quality of life in neighborhoods.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Yeah, I agree also. I think coming from like the active transportation lens, I think we saw early on in COVID, just not even thinking about this sort of winter placemaking type conversation, we saw early on in COVID, quick adjustments being made and red tape being cut to do things like, temporarily hand over streets to pedestrians and bicyclists, or slow cars down on certain streets, or, we saw lots of adjustments in the public space to make COVID a little bit less horrifying and to allow social distancing and stuff. So I think we've seen that from the beginning. And now it's just a matter of where we place that type of momentum and energy a little bit. So I completely agree. We have a question here about pushback on propane fueled heaters. And the question is sort of inspired by, I guess, I don't think I even knew this, but Paris, France has decided that in 2021, they're going to begin banning them with a climate change kind of perspective. And the question really is, have we seen locally any pushback on the use of propane heaters?
I'll speak for Bristol. I don't know of any pushback that we've received. You know, I know that there are propane heaters, but there's other propane heaters available. You know, I think that when we went out to our different vendors to try and acquire these, I think the name of the game was what's in stock and what can we get quickly to assist the businesses. And, you know, if it was electric heaters, you know, we might have chosen electric heaters, but I think the important thing was getting it into the hands of the businesses so that they can continue the operations this past fall going into this winter. You know, yeah.
Yeah, we reached out to a lot of environmental engineers and heating experts. I mean, I came from a plumbing supply business that was focused on heating work and heating planning, and I reached out to contacts there and was asking people what are the alternatives to propane heaters and that are efficient too. And there really isn't much. I mean, there's one concept in the guide that uses solar energy to heat water tanks and then disperses it when you open the windows from it, and you can dig into the details on that. I don't know the science behind it as well as some people might, whether it's practical or not. At a certain point, I think the propane heaters, like Adam was saying, don't make a difference. A lot of it really, you need to kind of just encourage dressing warm, right? Dress like you're going to an 8-hour Patriots game for a 2-hour dinner outside. I think that's probably going to be the more efficient method of doing this than trying to throw as much propane as possible. And it gets expensive too if you're not getting it covered by your city. So.
Thank you, guys. So we actually had 2 questions or kind of comments too, that were on exactly the same topic, which I think is interesting because I haven't heard much talk about this with sort of winter placemaking stuff, which is basically when we're incorporating artists into some of these projects, you know, how do we make sure that they're getting appropriately compensated and not simply with like you'll get exposure with it, which is sort of an overdone underpayment, I guess you could call it, of artists, musicians, and the like. So how is that kind of process of fair compensation played into some of these projects and ideas so far for everybody?
Yeah, I saw that question from Alexander. Hey, Alexander, how are you? We are, I mean, part of the mission from at least the funding that we got from Bar Foundation was to make sure that we're also using some of the money to not just support initiatives that are supporting small businesses, but also supporting local craftsmen, artists, makers. The fire pits are all being fabricated locally as opposed to being purchased on Amazon. It's a little bit more expensive, but we're lucky that we have the flexibility to spend a little bit more to support local craftspeople, makers, planners, and everybody. I mean, I've seen the budgets. We're paying some of them directly, and we're ensuring that all the craftspeople are getting paid, all the planners and designers are getting paid. And the communities that are using local artists to make those selfie stations, they're getting paid as well. And we've subcontracted that work out to some local creative organizations that are ensuring that I know pay their artists and pay their artists fair wages too. So thanks, Alexander. Appreciate it. Good to hear you're doing well.
Well, for the Broad Strokes project, which is the art in the windows of the small businesses, we are also paying a stipend for pretty much, you know, a rental fee almost for the artwork, because we definitely, you know, want to, you know, the exposure is important, but obviously I think one of the comments was that doesn't right away feed your children. So it's a small stipend, but it is something because we recognize that we're utilizing their artwork and you know, benefiting from that. So we want to make sure that the artists are paid. So Yeah, I totally support that. I know there were different grants in Rhode Island, like through RISCA, and I think maybe from the National Endowment for the Arts. Sometimes it seems like the grants, the time and energy spent putting into them might not necessarily always get back. But that's something that you have to weigh out in your own budget, whether it's worth applying for grants. But I think there is some funding out there for the art community, because everybody's been hit hard, but they've really been hit hard, the arts and culture side of it.
And just going off of what Leah said with regards to the state and federal grants, I think depending on the type of project, those type of grants may be worth it if it's for, a larger endeavor. I would say in Bristol, we are very fortunate that we have a very strong volunteer base, and we have a lot of different business advocacy organizations. So we have a Downtown Merchants Association, we have a Chamber of Commerce, we have a tourism group that just specialize in promoting Bristol events. And every year we contribute funds to that effort. So, every year we kind of go over that event calendar and we look at different type of events and initiatives that we want to support. And certainly as we look at, adjusting our events and, reimagining what we can do with the downtown, I see that as an avenue where, different funding opportunities may come available in Bristol. And then in addition to that, similar to this discussion here today, we are very fortunate in Bristol to have a lot of corporate sponsors and personal sponsorships for, very specific initiatives.
Yeah, thank you all. Really important item to address. So I appreciate taking the time to do that. In the interest of time, I'm going to have kind of one more question here. And I want to thank everybody for submitting these questions and for being here. And again, thank you our panelists. So the last question that I'm kind of, again, combining something that I wanted to ask with someone else's question, which is essentially like, what can both just average folks, like me, along with maybe our elected officials do that we're not currently doing to, I think, both support all these projects to maybe help bring them to life, other than obviously shopping small, which I think we should all do all the time. And one of the questions was specifically in that realm about helping Adam, your, I think, really brilliant bench idea. How do we help make these things happen? Is there some funding that we can like sign a petition for? Is it calling our elected officials? What are some action items that most of us can kind of take away to help bring some of these great ideas to life?
I'll jump in. Well, let's Adam, you want?
I'd say if we could find a way to, it's been great to see the local business organizations and municipal people working together and bending and changing and trying to adapt to help everybody. And those ways of thinking have been great. If we could, I know Providence has a huge resource of artists and builders and things like that. If we could actually directly reach out and combine the, artists and businesses with the municipal to be like, hey, let's bring roundtables like this and give funding to, say, the Steel Yard, or to get architecture students at RISD or one of the other organizations like Downstate Designs to pull together and build neighborhoods for winter festivals, things that would, directly fund the artist communities, which have been really hard hit, and do it from the government, the people that can pull together the people who know who can get funding and things like that. So more of a direct, not as much of the grants and all those things have been great, but just saying, hey, let's just all come and work together right now, and we'll find the funding to make what works happens, just to keep everybody working.
Yeah, I mean, really well said, Adam. Like, I definitely agree too. I mean, I think if you look at, like, we're based in Detroit, and I've been out to Detroit a number of times. I've been to Milwaukee a number of times. If you look at how those cities have recovered from economic declines and difficult periods, it's been through cross-sector collaboration. It's been, if you're seeing how we're recovering now, right? I mean, you're looking at architecture firms who are designing safe ways for hospitals to set up COVID testing. I mean, there's so much of that kind of cross-sector collaboration that you wouldn't necessarily obviously expect to see. And I think we're going to need more of that, because it's going to be a tough winter no matter what we do. And it's going to be a tough spring coming out of this. So trying to encourage conversations in between different communities that don't always talk, between different professions that don't always talk, and seeing what everybody needs, asking questions. I mean, I think for me, hearing from restaurant owners about what their needs are, more than just going out and doing whatever somebody tells me on Instagram, I think is probably one of the big things, is just find out what your local community and local businesses need first before going out and trying to help as much.
Well, I think that's what's a very unique avenue about the Broad Street Regeneration Initiative, is that we are a collaborative, Broad Street being what is tying the three communities and all of our different partners together. It's unique in that you don't always get that regional planning. Sometimes you're very much like, I'm this town and I'm this town. So this tying it together is, I think, a first step for collaboration and for bigger things. And just for what people can do, I don't know if you've heard of, there's a website, Shop Local Rhode Island, and it's Rhode Island spelled out.com, where businesses can be listed on there for just like, local, any type of local business. So definitely check that out as a business and as a customer who wants to support local. There are a lot of, it's a free way to be promoted. So, that's that.
CJ, one thing I would bring up to the group here, and I'm sure everyone's well aware of it, but there appears to be another round of PPP financing being made available. Latest reports are Congress is going to report something out on Friday. And there are going to be some differing criteria for businesses, but it could be to the advantage of many of the folks on this call, restaurants, hospitality industry, small retail, because they are going to try and make it more directed towards those type of businesses. You are not disqualified if you've already received a PPP loan. So I would urge folks to keep an eye out for that. I don't think it's going to be the mad dash that it was the first time this program came out. I think it'll be a little smoother than that. So I don't, there doesn't need to be over stress on it, but it's a good program, a good way to keep your staff employed during the uncertain winter. So I would reach out to your respective bank, or obviously we're going to have information at centervillebank.com as things become clear.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Justin, for that reminder to mention that. Yeah, so another round of PPP is super important. Yeah, again, I mean, shop local, support where you can. The concept of these grants and loans that are coming down kind of from the top. I think there are often some petitions out there to sign, which I've been trying to do. Not sure how much of an impact that makes, but also call your local electeds if something like this is up for a possibility to support really important stuff. So we're at 12:30, perfect timing. I just want to thank all of you so much for being part of this conversation. I was really excited for this, and I'm just more excited now with all these ideas being thrown up in the air than I was before we even got started. So thank you, Leah, Adam, Chris, Jonathan. Thank you so much, Justin, Centerville Bank, and along with Bank RI and Navigant Credit Union for sponsoring today's event. Couldn't have done it without you. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to drop into the chat right now just one more link to Winter Places. If you haven't checked it out, please do. It's really just fun to look at. There's lots of great renderings and ideas, and it's really exciting. So thanks one more time for being here, everybody, and hope you have a great rest of your beautiful snow day. Get outside. Take care. Thanks again, everyone.